Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings, especially to my friends in the United Kingdom, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson is at this very moment reshuffling, as they say in the UK, his cabinet. That means he's firing a bunch of people. Julian Smith is out as Northern Ireland Secretary. Chris Skidmore is out as the Universities Minister. Esther McVey, the Housing Minister, is gone. Andrea Leadsom has been sacked as the Business Secretary. Teresa Villiers, is that how you say her name? Out at the Environmental Department. Jeffrey Cox, the AG with the wonderful voice, gone. George Freeman, out as Transport Minister. Nuris Ghani, also sacked from the same department. More coming, more replacements coming. The big three, though, are all ensconced. Sajid Javid, for example, and Priti Patel, who runs the Home Office, and Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab are all back, the big three. Unfortunately for Patel, I really dislike her YY decision, but I'll keep you posted. I'm hoping Dr. Liam Fox returns, a friend of the show, returns to the government. We will see. I have got a new column over at the Washington Post this morning. On the landing page, all you have to do is go to WashingtonPost.com and scroll down. You'll see Hugh Hewitt. The title is Trump v. Sanders is the main event. Everything else is an undercard. It's generated about 1,000 very, very complimentary comments. Generalissimo, you can imagine. Have you read through the 1,000 comments at my new column yet?
I have seen the comments, and they are remarkably consistent with your previous columns.
Yes, they are. They just love me at the Washington Post, the readers of the Washington Post who comment there. So I thought I would share it with you to begin your day. I think it's important. About 2,500 years ago, the Greek philosopher Plato wrote a book, The Republic, within which he included a very famous story, the allegory of the cave. Plato describes a group of people chained to one wall of a cave all their lives. The people watch shadows projected on the opposite wall from objects passing in front of a fire. The shadows are the prisoner's world. It's all they know, and they misinterpret the reality of what casts the shadows. There have been many caves of many sorts in America over the past few decades. Consumers of NPR, CNN, and MSNBC are in one cave. Consumers of conservative talk radio and Fox News are in another. The elites casting the shadows used to be called the Gang of 500 by ABC News' The Note. On the right, we called ourselves the Borg, an analogy of evil, the evil mass drawn from Star Trek villainy. Slowly, however, the vast majority of those in the taste-making, influence-distributing, always chattering classes morphed in recent years into one vast, great, capital N narrative. Hashtags have gone the way of BuzzFeed lists, but hashtag the narrative would have been a grand entry in the list of hashtags. The Gang of 5,000 and their wannabe imitators. That's the narrative. The narrative, very much at work these very days, describes the almost physical force the initiated among the narrative attempt to impose on American political discourse. President Trump is the Shiva of the narrative, the great destroyer of the conceit that a few thousand people in Manhattan, the Beltway, Silicon Valley, and Hollywood can shape the political moment. Almost exactly 4 years ago, Wall Street Journal columnist Peggy Noonan delivered a verdict on the politics of the age that remains without equal. She wrote, quote, that the unprotected were rising up against the protected. They did indeed, and Trump was elected. In the years since, the great disruptor is not disappointed, bringing his wrecking ball to every conceit of the elite. Meanwhile, the activists of both the left and the right have had it with the elites in their caves, the 500, the Borg, and now the narrative. They've had it with those people trying to frame their reality. For at least the past year, the narrative has tried to anoint former Vice President Joe Biden as the one who would strike down Trump. After first, Special Counsel Robert Mueller III and then Representative Adam B. Schiff failed. But in the wake of the New Hampshire primary, the narrative has endured another blow. Conservative political analyst on this show yesterday Barone, who has forgotten more about American politics than many of the self-anointed living at the heart of the narrative ever knew, bluntly declared yesterday morning about Biden's campaign, quote, "It's over." Barone delivered the same verdict on Senator Elizabeth Warren. The narrative seeks a defensible line with Amy Klobuchar, and the Never Trump movement has never given up on getting the center right back into its cave. Former South Bend Mayor, former Mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg, for a brief moment, thought to try and break out of the narrative with a wholly unheard of strategy of talking candidly, calmly, and repeatedly with everyone. But then he gave up and is treading water now as a result, not gaining the lead he could have had. Former New York Mayor Bloomberg is going to try and buy a replacement for the narrative, but that's going to fail as well. The rejection of the narrative doesn't have the drama of a long repressed people breaking free. For his example happened in the Arab Spring, but there's plenty of exhaustion and anger out there at being told how to frame issues and understand conflicts. The elite, the narrative, trying to tell us how to understand everything has caused this anger. People in America, normal people, want a showdown, one that is long overdue, between the force that is socialism, often called progressivism in an attempt to gain a rhetorical advantage, but America's growing political savvy has made that dodge increasingly ineffectual. They want that showdown between socialism and the wild side that is freedom. Freedom to speak, think, build, profit, and generally do whatever one wants that isn't illegal. Donald Trump versus Bernie Sanders is the main event. Everyone else is an undercard. Everything else is an undercard. The narrative does not want that showdown. Showdowns produce winners, if only for a time. A winner means irrelevance for the people who nudge and exclude, people who influence and attempt to exploit. A winner means vindication and a mandate for Trump, or an invitation to actually try out socialism here in the United States for Sanders. Such a knockdown political brawl would bring some catharsis, at least for a time. So I conclude, let's have at it. The nearly 6 million Americans who watch cable news on any given day want that showdown. The more than 25 million people listening to NPR or Rush Limbaugh or anyone in between, including me, want that showdown. The serial posters about politics on Facebook want that showdown. It's just the narrative that doesn't. Let's hope, I conclude, that the narrative gets crushed. Vote for Bernie Sanders if you're in an open primary state. Even if you're an independent or a Republican, you know Trump's got the nomination locked up. Vote for Bernie Sanders. Let's get Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, by the way, is fighting back against the narrative. James Carville's a friend of mine, but he's a part of the narrative. Here's Bernie Sanders on CNN yesterday talking about Bernie Sanders talking about Carville's blasting away at him, cut 17.
Look, James, in all due respect, is a political hack who said very terrible things when he was working for Clinton against Barack Obama. I think he said some of the same things. Look, we are taking on the establishment. This is no secret to anybody. We're taking on the wall. I guess the former head of Goldman Sachs attacked me yesterday.
Yeah, he had
We're
some
taking on Wall Street.
Look, stop. Wall Street. Bernie's taking on everyone. He wants to take on Trump, and I say all for it. Bernie then told Anderson Cooper he's going to win, cut 19.
Anderson, in my view, the American people want a government, finally, that represents all of us, not just wealthy campaign contributors and the billionaire class. And that is why we're going to win in South Carolina, in Nevada, and we're going to beat Donald Trump.
And then he said this to Chris Hayes, cut number 20.
Well, I think in general, what Plouffe said is right. But I think you have to take a look at the whole nature of the campaign and a whole lot of factors within the campaign that we don't know yet. But in general, I think it is a fair statement to say that it would be very divisive. I mean, the convention would have to explain to the American people, hey, candidate X, kind of got the most votes and won the most delegates in the primary process, but we're not going to give him or her the nomination. I think that would be a very divisive moment for the Democratic Party.
You know, someone had to choreograph this scene. I'm not saying who it was. Still working in the Joker on the sequence on the steps. It's great morning music, isn't it? Get up, get going, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Turn it up. Get going, get moving, get out there, get to the car. There's bad news everywhere, but get going. There's good news. It's going to be Trump Sanders, but there's bad news. My business story of the day, brought to you by Birch Gold, is about coronavirus. Now remember, Birch Gold wants to encourage you to diversify your IRA, your 401k. They want you to move a portion of it into precious metals. To get all the information on how to do that, to back it with actual physical precious metals, text the word Hugh, my name, H-U-G-H, to 474747 and request that free information kit. For just this month of February, which has an extra day, a bonus day, Birch Gold is celebrating February's bonus day with a special bonus offer. For every $5,000 you move into your physical metals-backed IRA that they will manage, they will give you a free 1-ounce silver coin. But you have to text them and buy this month. You have to complete the transfer. So if you move $25,000 of your IRA into physical precious metals, Birch Gold will send you 5 of those coins. They've got thousands of satisfied customers, countless 5-star reviews, and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Text Hugh to 474747 to get your information kit. Claim your eligibility for this offer today. That's Hugh to 474747. Coronavirus, 9 cases in the United Kingdom, 242 new deaths in one day, 14,840 new patients in China. They may started to classify people differently. Disruption and empty streets. And here's the real kicker. Whenever you see Chernobyl in a headline, it's not good. From the South China Morning Post, quote, headline, Beijing battles crisis of Chernobyl proportions in coronavirus outbreak. How's that for a headline? Beijing battles crisis of Chernobyl proportions in coronavirus outbreak. Now, it's not in the United States. If it gets here at all, it'll be months. I mean, we got a few random cases, but we throw people in the lockdown right away, and we keep them there for a long time until we know. We learned the lesson of the 1918 Great Influenza. You got to go read that book by John Barry, The Great Influenza. It's riveting, by the way. Philadelphia had so many dead people, the then Archbishop and later Cardinal had to summon all the nuns from the convents where they had taken vows of silence to bury the dead and care for the sick. The priests got steam shovels for the graveyard. They just put them in mass graves, lined up the caskets, said the holy orders over them, not the holy orders, the last rites, and filled them in. I mean, thousands and thousands, 675,000 Americans died in 2 months. The Great Influenza of 1918. So viruses are bad news. But, business story of the day, there will be winners. Amazon has gone up for 4 straight days. I expect it'll go up again today. Home businesses, stay-at-home servers, people deliver food at home, people deliver entertainment to your home like Amazon, going to go up. My friends at Secure Space, that's SECURSPACE, there's no in the E in the Secure Space. Privately held, you can't invest in it, but you can use it. They are assisters to those who are disrupted. They find freight space. They're the Airbnb for freight. You know, they take freight yards with capacity and they match it with people who've got 1,000 sinks that can't go in because the 1,000 plumbing units that were supposed to arrive before the sinks didn't arrive because China's shut down. So there will be winners, and the business world is busy. The stock market is busy looking for those winners like Amazon and Secure Space. And at the same time, it's taking a toll on the travel business. Oh, is it taking a toll on the travel business? More when we come back. Don't forget, text Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Good Thursday morning to you. I'm joined by Jake Sherman of Politico, where he and Anna Palmer write Politico Playbook. I've just been reading Inside the Bloomberg Machine. It's a great edition. Good morning, Jake. Thank you for joining me.
Good morning from Nashville, Hugh. Thanks for having me.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. Got out-of-the-box question first. You talked to a lot of people on the Hill. You wrote A Hill Worth Dying For. Are people talking about coronavirus the way I'm talking about coronavirus? Are they talking about it with, we need to be watching this everyday urgency?
No, I mean, there have been briefings, but it's definitely not top of mind. I think people deal with the crisis directly in front of them, not the crisis around the corner, and oftentimes, unless it's, ravishing some American city, people are not going to pay attention to the extent that they need to. But obviously, this is a global health crisis, and I think the leadership, the Nancy Pelosi, Kevin McCarthy, Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer level is obviously much more attuned to it than the rank and file.
Whenever I see a headline, I've been reading the South China Morning Post this morning, Beijing battles crisis of Chernobyl proportions in coronavirus. Whenever you see Chernobyl in a headline, that's not good news.
Not good news, no. And I mean, listen, I think people should be comforted, perhaps, if they are looking for comfort in the fact that the administration has been in touch with its Chinese counterparts. So it's not as if it doesn't seem as if everyone's asleep at the switch.
Oh, and there are other good signs. I mean, there will be parts of the world that do very well. Amazon is going up because everyone's going to stay at home if it gets here, and people like Secure Space that help trucking companies deal with freight shortages and disruption. There are winners for every losers on the business side, and it's not here yet, but man, China is screwed. Second question. I've got a column over at the Washington Post, front page, on the landing page right now. I think most of America wants Trump versus Sanders. I think that we're sick of the narrative that is enforced on us by a few thousand elites. The note at ABC used to call it the Gang of 500. You guys don't have a name for it at Politico Playbook, but it's basically your subscription list. It's the people who read Politico Playbook every morning like me. We have a narrative, and our narrative is Bernie can't win. I actually voted for Bernie, but is that breaking down, Jake? Are people coming to grips with the fact that Bernie is the front runner?
He definitely is the front runner. I think people have come to grips with that. I really do think we as a collective, whatever you call the group, Gang of 500 or whatever, we are underestimating Bloomberg. I do think that at this moment. I think that for just the amount of money he's going to put into this race. I mean, I was with him the last day in Chattanooga and now in Nashville last night. I mean, this is a guy who's spending untold amounts of money in a quite efficient way, and we put it in Playbook this morning. If you are sitting at a bar talking to your friend about how you'd run a campaign with absolutely no concern about spending, this is it. I mean, he's skipped the traditional states in favor of states that are delegate rich, and he thinks he could compete. Now, listen, we all know the downsides of Mike Bloomberg and his many shortcomings. He's been in public life for a very long time, and he held office in the most difficult media climate, I'd argue, in America. So his shortcomings are very well known. That said, he keeps on creeping up, and he's very worth paying attention to.
Yeah, I think we're going to end up with four candidates, no two of whom are going to be able to get to 50%, which is interesting. Bernie, Buttigieg, Mayor Bloomberg, and Amy Klobuchar. About Bloomberg, I will say one thing as a radio professional, Jake. The fact that he is self-funding means he has to include his voice in every ad. I would love for you to do a focus group.
Is that true? Is that
yes? I'm Mike Bloomberg, and I paid for this ad. It's in every ad that he pays for. Other people have super funds. It's a terrible voice. He's got a horrible voice. If you ever sit in a focus group on his voice, it's a put-off voice.
Yeah, and listen, I didn't cover him like a lot of the other people in the mainstream media and other parts of media have. A lot of people in the national media covered him in New York as the mayor, where, listen, he is very, I don't want to say difficult to deal with, but with the press, he's short, he's dismissive of questions he doesn't like. Yesterday, a reporter was trying to ask him a follow-up question about his stop and frisk policies, and he said, "Miss, I've already answered your question." I mean,
miss?
These are things that are quite, whatever you think of him, these are things that are going to come up in a national campaign.
Oh, yeah, so, you can be Bernie Sanders and get away with that. Let me play you a clip from Bernie on CNN with Anderson Cooper last night, cut number 17. You can get away with this if you're Bernie Sanders.
Look, James, in all due respect, is a political hack who said very terrible things when he was working for Clinton.
So you can call James Carville a political hack if you're Bernie Sanders. You can't, if you're Mike Bloomberg, call a woman reporter miss, right?
Well, I think, listen, I think Donald Trump has rewritten the rules about everything, so I don't know what people get away with anymore. I don't know what, I'm just telling you from the national media's point of view. Many people who have covered Mike Bloomberg for many years bring these things up as things that are worth paying attention to because they caught the ear of reporters back in his time as New York City mayor, the 3 terms that he served. And he described his stop and frisk policies yesterday as something that's caught a lot of flack, but he said, well, listen, I got reelected 3 times, so people obviously liked what I did, which is not, if you're focus grouping a message, probably not the message you focus group. So, I mean, listen, he is somebody, he's already spent nearly $400 million of his own money, which is absolutely wild at this stage in the game.
Yeah, but they're not buying my station, so they clearly are not going after the center-right vote. So I actually don't know if they bought my stations. Who knows who Mike Bloomberg's buying?
I would imagine they did, because yesterday it was a radio host from who was, I think, with an HBCU, a historical black college focused programmer. That's how he described himself. Said, thanks for spending $3.5 million on ads on our station. So it seems like he's buying up a lot of radio.
You ought to be going to places where no one else is. I thought, I'm on all over South Carolina. I'm on all over California. People should be doing it, but you never know. Here's Bernie Sanders on MSNBC with Chris Hayes last night. He's got an argument about what's going to happen at the end. I want to get your comment on it, Jake Sherman. Cut number 20, Bernie Sanders talking about what happens when you get to the nomination with the most delegates.
Well, I think in general, what Plouffe said is right, but I think you have to take a look at the whole nature of the campaign and a whole lot of factors within the campaign that we don't know yet. But in general, I think it is a fair statement to say that it would be very divisive. I mean, the convention would have to explain to the American people, hey, candidate X, kind of got the most votes and won the most delegates in the primary process, but we're not going to give him or her the nomination. I think that would be a very divisive moment for the Democratic Party.
What do you think, Jake? Does the plurality...
Couldn't agree more.
What's that?
I couldn't agree more.
Yes.
I mean, this is the weakness, to be honest with you, in anybody but Bernie right now, right? I mean, if he comes away winning, X amount of states, even forget the delegates. If the guy wins 20 states and is not the nominee, that's a problem. And I asked this to Mike Bloomberg yesterday. I said, could you become the nominee without winning a state? I put this in Playbook this morning, and he kind of gave some muddled answer and says, I don't know why it even matters. So that's a big question for Bloomberg. If he amasses a bunch of delegates in states like Texas, California, North Carolina, all the states he's playing in right now, Arkansas, and goes to the convention having close to a plurality, I guess, or even a plurality, but has not won a state, how do you give him the nomination and not Bernie Sanders, who has won a bunch of states and who has played by the traditional Democratic rules? That is a big question, perhaps the central question of the next 4 or 5 months, and I don't think that should be dismissed. And Bernie is reflecting the reality from a lot of Democrats.
Did you talk to Bloomberg on the phone in a gaggle, or were you one-on-one?
In a gaggle. No, he's not doing many one-on-one interviews, which I think needs to change. I mean, I'm sure Meet the Press or Face the Nation or all these Sunday shows will want to have him on. He is not qualified for the NBC debate in Las Vegas quite yet. He needs one more national poll. I believe he will get that in the next week. I believe there will be another national poll released that will qualify him for that debate. It'll be interesting how he sees that. I mean, I will say to his credit, he did a gaggle in Chattanooga yesterday, and he answered everyone's questions.
So tell us about the gaggle. This is a little behind the scenes of Politico Playbook. How many people are in Chattanooga following Mike Bloomberg around? How many questions did he take, and how sparky was he with the assembled media in the way that President Trump will often, he's not sparky, he'll just take everyone's questions and shut people down or being a problem?
He did that. The same thing with Bloomberg is actually quite Trumpy in a weird way. He's He likes throwing insults, especially at Donald Trump. I mean, there were a bunch of reporters, the Washington Post, New York Times, myself, all the networks had at least a camera. Some had correspondents. So he has a healthy contingent of press with him. He doesn't have a presidential level press corps, but he had a decent amount of people who were following him around from Chattanooga to Nashville, and he's on actually today to North Carolina, Texas, and then Virginia this weekend. So again, these Super Tuesday states. He did, I will say, to his credit, he answered every single reporter's question. He did not take multiple questions from reporters, but most politicians don't do that. But it was impressive to see him give the time. And listen, it's in his interest. He wants earned media. He wants press. He had to answer the question about the stop and frisk and the racially insensitive comments that he made in 2015 and in years previous to that. So he had an incentive to get some of these questions out of the way. But that being said, I mean, one question each, and it was a useful exercise for somebody who is running in an unconventional campaign with basically unlimited money, because he has said he'll spend a couple $2 billion. And that's a lot of money, but he needs to, because he started late and he's not in the game at the moment, but he's creeping up.
Well, if he takes a waspish tone, that's one thing. Does he know what he's talking about? Did anyone ask him, for example, about the nuclear triad? Did anyone ask him about the B-21? Did anyone ask him about the Columbia class? Is he down in the weeds on policy, or is he still a big city mayor who wants to banish Coca-Cola?
I think it's the latter. He didn't talk about banishing Coca-Cola, but it's mostly economic development. It's mostly his theory of the case is why pay attention. I'm going to just take 1 second to explain this. Why pay attention to Iowa and New Hampshire when there's delegate-rich states all over the country, and we need to be able to win in Tennessee, not only New Hampshire and Iowa, which is an interesting theory of the case. Obviously, Tennessee's a pretty red state, so he's that's a little bit far-fetched. But that being said, he basically said the party's going to unite around me theoretically because they want to beat Donald Trump. And I'm the most electable is basically what he said. And I have a proven record of independent policies that are by and large, pretty popular. That's his theory of the case. He didn't get in the weeds a lot about national security or anything like that, but that's just not where the questions were focused. We wanted to get him on the stop and frisk stuff and basically the theory of the case of his candidacy after New Hampshire and Iowa, which presented Bernie Sanders as the top candidate in a pretty muddled field after that. And that was kind of the focus. But I have to imagine there's going to be more scrutiny, and his candidacy becomes different, becomes more interesting, and there's a lot of holes to fill out as he gets deeper into the weeds on policy.
Jake Sherman of Politico Playbook. Thank you, my friends. Follow him at Jake Sherman. Get Politico Playbook every morning as I do. Be informed at the start of the morning. And don't forget, get yourself relieffactor.com. It's that time in the morning when I take it. There we go. And I love the design of Relief Factor. Opens so easily. Most pill packets don't. Got my completely stone cold Honor Bound coffee. And down it goes. I switched over from coffee earlier this morning. My voice a little shot. But I carry curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. Those 4 natural supplements perfectly calibrated in the right amounts. No guesswork. Easy to open. Beautifully designed. Easy to swallow. They keep you going. They keep you moving, whether it's 3, 4, 5 miles you're doing every day, walking, running, jogging, trundling, whatever it is, sprinting. Whether you're working out with weights, whether you're working out with barbells, whether you're doing whatever you're doing, do it with relieffactor.com. Support for the temporary relief of minor aches and pains. The report on politics in Israel coming up with Michael Oren from the Jewish state. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, standing by waiting for Michael Oren from Israel. In the meantime, here's Joe Biden flubbing the number to text donations to poor Joe. Cut number 1.
So we can chip in and support those who listen to this. Chip in and support our campaign. Text Joe to 3. Excuse me, I got to get this right. Joe to 30330.
No, Joe, no. Then Joe talked about reincarnation in Charleston. Cut number 2.
I've been coming here a long time. When I die, I want to be reborn in Charleston, actually. I like the low country, you know what I mean?
No, Joe, we really don't know what you mean.
Come on, man. Come on. Play the radio. Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night. The phone.
You know,
You're a lying dog-faced pony shoulder.
No, I'm not. Robert Gibbs said on CNN last night, big Joe Biden supporter, he said this, cut number 3.
Where does that delegate math look like? And so you may have 5 go on, you may not have 5 that are plausible. And I think, an existential crisis tonight for Vice President Biden, if he's got to win South Carolina, it just has to. And he has to prove that electorate that hasn't participated fully yet, when it does, is still for him. And I think that's a huge and open question tonight.
Now, look, he's not going to win South Carolina. Republicans are going to vote for Bernie Sanders like I voted for Bernie Sanders. I think Bernie Sanders is going to be the nominee. I have a Washington Post column over at the front page on why the people want Bernie versus Donald. They want Sanders-Trump. They want Trump-Sanders. They want socialism versus free enterprise. They want 2 hard-charging, hard-swinging septuagenarians who have nothing to lose and everything to say. That's what they want. The narrative does not want that. Here is Chuck Todd and Charlie Cook on MTP. Meet the Press Daily yesterday, cut 15.
First of all, I don't know why some people, I feel like the only people that are going out on the limb and calling Bernie Sanders a front runner, they have other reasons to call him a front runner. Feels like there's no front runner right now. One person leads delegates. One person has a lock on a chunk of the party. Well, we don't know where this goes.
We don't know where it's going, but I'm willing to take some guesses. I think I know who the nominee is going to be.
Oh, well,
I think it's going to be Michael Bloomberg. I mean, the thing is, you can...
That's a pretty bold statement for a guy who is yet to appear in the debate stage. For a guy who has ever debated a real set of candidates. That's a big statement. I know.
No, I'm looking at for a party that is obsessed with beating President Trump.
Yeah.
I think they'd be really jumpy about going to Bernie Sanders.
That's clear.
I think there are enough things where if you told me today that Pete Buttigieg was going to be president of the United States someday, I'd absolutely believe that.
Yeah.
But when you're 38, you ought to be 48, and you look 28. Mayor of South Bend, Indianapolis, and I don't think there's much of a anti-gay in the Democratic Party, but there's a skittishness. Do you want to take a risk?
Right.
Do you want to, whether it's...
But Nira, they all feel... I will say this, Nira. I look at them all and I'm like, I could make a risk case on all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think...
Everybody's a big gaping hole somewhere.
Nira Tanden doesn't want Bernie. Chuck doesn't want Bernie. Charlie Cook doesn't want Bernie. The narrative does not want Bernie. I want Bernie. I voted for Bernie. I think every Republican out there who's allowed to, it is your right by God-given right to be a citizen in the United States. And if the law allows you to vote in an open primary, vote. Because I've been asking for closed primaries for years because Democrats have been voting in Republican elections for years. And now it's time for Republicans to vote in Democratic elections. And it's time to get the choice out in the open. They're all socialists. Honest to goodness, they're all socialists. Amy Klobuchar is not a moderate. Joe Biden is not a moderate. Pete Buttigieg is not a moderate. They're all on the left. But Bernie is the real deal leftist. Bernie tells you the truth about where his economic policies are going. President Obama did not tell you the truth about how far to the left he was going to go. Hillary didn't tell you the truth. But Bernie tells you the truth. So by God, let's go with Bernie. Let's get the main event. That's my Washington Post column. Go over and find it. Send it to everywhere. Let me remind you as well, MyPillow.com. I've got a sore neck this morning. I am going to MyPillow.com this morning and sending a note to, I'm going to use my own promo code Hugh. and get that neck brace. I'm going to do that. You don't have to worry about anything other than that. I'm going to do that with mypillow.com. Then I'm going to go buy more Amazon, I think. Because I'll tell you, when I see that headline, in the South China Morning Post, Chernobyl-like crisis, that's not a good headline. People are going to stay at home. Amazon is going to make money. They're going to print money at Amazon. That Jeff Bezos ought to skip the whole part about distributing things and just get a printing press for the money. I love that joke at the Oscars. Chris Rock said, "You're the richest man in the world. You're so rich you got divorced and you're the richest man in the world." That is rich. But he's going to rich because he gets people aren't going to go out. I've been reading this, rereading The Great Influenza by John Barry. Once fear grips a country like it did the United States in 19 or China in 2020, nobody goes out. Nobody goes out. Okay, so who brings stuff to you? Amazon brings stuff to you. That's why Amazon is going to be a winner. It's why Secure Space, where they're going to park all those disrupted trucks, Secure Space, SECUR, SPACE, they're going to be a winner. I'm invested in both. I'm happy business-wise, but man, I am not happy for the planet. Stay tuned. Morning, Glory America, bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to my 400 affiliates spread far and wide. The big breaking news this morning is out of Great Britain, where Boris Johnson is undertaking a cabinet reshuffle that has exploded as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sajid Javid, number 2, has quit in a throwdown by Dominic Cummings over his aides. The ex-chancellor may have forgotten what happened long time ago. 130 years ago, when Lord Randolph Churchill, who was number 2 to Lord Salisbury, quit, expecting no one could replace him. Guess what? He had to say memorably, I had forgotten Goshen. There is always someone to replace you. No one is irreplaceable. I am joined by General David Deptula, who's the Dean of the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. We're going to talk about the defense budget, but I wonder, General, if that is not always true at all times and everywhere, that no one is irreplaceable.
Well, good morning, Hugh. In the larger sense of the question or issue that you raise, that's true. On the other hand, I mean, there will always be somebody to step up to replace whoever left. On the other hand, people matter and leadership matters. I think probably the most recent example of this that your audience will understand is when Soleimani, the mastermind behind the Iranian strategy, was taken out. He's got somebody that was put in to replace him, but not with the same kind of impact or influence that he had. So, positions are replaceable, but personalities and people are not necessarily going to be of the same caliber when they do step into the breach.
You put your finger on it. When the Allies took out, or the American Air Force took out Yamamoto, there was no Yamamoto. If they had gotten Churchill, that would have been doggone difficult to recover from. FDR was pretty doggone irreplaceable in 1941. But if you're a number 2 looking at a number 1, you're not irreplaceable. Now, General, I wanted to talk to you about the defense budget. I've been giving Secretary Esper a hard time on the air, and I've been doing so because the plan does not get anywhere close to $355. I've heard from friends in the Pentagon, look, it's not his plan. He inherited this budget. It's the president's budget. I've heard like 30 different excuses. But first question. The Pentagon's budget is very much the Pentagon's budget. The president he can reject it, but by the time it gets over to OMB, they can tweak it. But they can't redo a Defense Department budget, can they?
It would be extraordinarily difficult to redo it. And the issue here is, what does the defense budget do in the context of meeting the objectives of our actual national defense strategy? That's at the fundamental crux of your comment.
Yes.
And the fact of the matter is, we've built a national security strategy, which is a big one. It focuses on being able to deter and, if necessary, defeat challenges by China and Russia, as well as to be able to deal with Iran, North Korea, and global terrorism all at the same time. Well, now, the peer competitors that we now have in the context of China and Russia are very much different than the threats that we have fought against during the war on global terrorism over the last 20 years. So we have to step up our game across all the services. But the problem is, as large as it is, we've got a strategy resource mismatch. The money that's been allocated to the defense budget is not sufficient to meet the needs of the defense strategy. So what you see is that the services, now the Air Force, I would suggest to you in particular, along with the Navy, have had to give up, if you will, or trade in current force structure in order to free up money in legacy investment that they can invest in future force capabilities. So that creates a tension between not being able to meet these objectives of a 386 operational squadron Air Force or a 355 ship Navy, because they've got to give up force structure that we have today to free up money to invest in the kind of future that can meet the needs of the defense strategy.
That is completely well put. I'm talking with Lieutenant General David Deptula, retired from the Air Force. He leads the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. General Deptula, I looked at the budget. I was happy with the top line on nuclear weaponry. The B-21 got funded. The Columbia got funded. But they didn't get funded with new money. They got funded by scavenging around in the services. And my Army friends are going to be mad at me. Big Army did not get nicked.
Right. And look, Hugh, here's the challenge. We really have four plausible alternatives here for resolving this mismatch. The first one is you can increase the defense budget.
Yes.
To be honest, that's not going to happen. The second one is to lower the expectations of the defense strategy. That's also not very likely. The third is to accept this strategy resource mismatch, which is potentially disastrous, and what we've been doing over the last 2 decades, or we can start evaluating defense capabilities in terms of the desired effects that they contribute to meeting the needs of the defense strategy. And that's what you're getting at. What you're saying is, look, regardless of what service a capability is in, we've got to look across the board and see what systems and capabilities best meet its needs. And large numbers of active duty infantry, armor, and Army divisions don't fit the current strategy. So,
and I want to add to this. You're saying much more eloquently than I said that I know we used a lot of Army in the last 20 years. I know that. I just don't think we're going to use it in the next 20 years. I think we're going to need a lot more deterrence in the sky and on the sea and under the sea. And I don't know anybody. I'm a civilian. I've never been anything other than a civilian who reads books. But I don't know anyone with your background who disagrees with me on that. I really don't know anyone who says we're going to be in a big land war again, although you can never see them coming. I just don't see it happening.
Well, the fact of the matter, you're spot on. The deal is, and the bottom line is, we've got to seek to make far more informed decisions that will result in our joint warfighters having optimal capabilities to meet the needs of the defense strategy, regardless of what service they might come from. And the fact of the matter is, not all defense programs or capabilities offer equal combat value. So this is the quandary that we're in.
What do you expect? We got 2 minutes here, General. What would you recommend Congress do with this budget?
Well, I think what the first thing that they need to do is they need to tell the Department of Defense, look, you got to stop allocating resources on the presumption that, you're giving them out in one-third split between the Army, Navy, and the Air Force. That's not the way to apportion resources to meet mission demand. You have to impose a means to evaluate desired capability by how well that capability contributes to our national defense strategy.
Agree. Now, last question. Do you think they gave enough money to the B-21?
The sufficient money has been given to the B-21 in the context of where it is in its development stages. What we want to do is develop that aircraft so it meets all the requirements. And then once we get to that point, then I would recommend an increase in funding to increase the quantities as fast as possible. But we don't want to rush the development stage. My understanding is it's coming along very, very well.
General David Deptula, keep coming back. Dean of the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. Follow him at Deptula_David. Time for the business story of the day, which is coronavirus. And if you are buying a house, you're one of the people that benefit. I tell you, Amazon is benefiting. Secure Space is benefiting. People are benefiting. Some segments of the marketplace are benefiting from the fact that coronavirus does not seem to be under control in China. The South China Morning Post has in a headline that says, Chernobyl-like crisis, it's never a good sign. But AndrewandTodd.com, they refinance your house. They're benefiting. AndrewandTodd.com are lenders with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, and they will lend you the money that you need to refinance your house at a lower rate, and rates are just great. Why? Because money is pouring into the United States because they know there are companies like secure space like Amazon that will do just fine, like Disney, like Netflix, that will do just fine in the United States. They serve you at home. They will. We understand how to deal with this. There are maybe Gilead Sciences. There are lots of companies in the United States that are going to do just fine. And as a result, money's pouring into the United States bond market and interest rates are going down. So andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172. Now is the time to refinance your house. Now is the time to get money out. Maybe pay for college, remodel, fix it up, buy a rental. Go to andrewandtodd.com or call them at 888-888-1172, 888-888-1172. Come right back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Good Thursday morning to you. What does 1886 have to do with Israel in 2020? We'll soon find out. Dr. Michael Oren joins me, historian extraordinaire, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, former deputy minister, and now our weekly correspondent from Jerusalem. Good morning, Dr. Oren. It's great to have you as always.
Lovely to be here, as always.
Now, you're a historian before you were a politician and a warrior. You're a historian, and you will know Churchill's history writ large in the Middle East. You wrote a book about that, so you know that Winston Churchill had quite a lot to do with the Middle East, right?
It did indeed. He is sort of the map maker of the Middle East. You can't understand the map of the Middle East without understanding Winston Churchill.
Yeah, see, he wrote it. He drew it, and his dad was named Lord Randolph Churchill, and his dad quit as the Chancellor of the Exchequer in 1886, daring Lord Salisbury to replace him, and Lord Salisbury replaced him. Now, the reason I bring that up is this morning Sajid Javid quit, and Boris Johnson replaced him. And that tells us a lot about prime ministers. There's only one at a time. What's it tell us about Benjamin Netanyahu, if anything, Michael Oren?
It's a little bit different system, but it's interesting to note that Lord Salisbury was what you call a Zionist, Hugh. He was an outspoken supporter of the notion of recreating a Jewish in our historic homeland, the land of Israel.
I didn't know that.
It was a good move for us. Salisbury was actually authored the term, this phrase that is often attributed to Jewish Zionists, but he actually said it, and the phrase was a land for a people without a land, because Palestine was notoriously and depopulated in the 19th century. Read any travelogue. Read Mark Twain. They'll tell you how there were no people in Palestine. It was amazing. And here was a people without a land. The Jews for a land without a people.
Wow.
And it remains the slogan to the day that the Palestinians hate, but it was Lord Salisbury.
Well, now, let's go back to the prime minister, because while Boris Johnson reshuffles everything, there is a reshuffling underway that will culminate next month in the elections. And we talk about it every week, and we have to because America's interested. I see in my Times of Israel that Avigdor Lieberman appears ready to drop a unity coalition demand. That means he's a man of the left now, right?
Yes, right. This is the man who keeps on refashioning himself. It's extraordinary. I know you read that article I published in the Atlantic a couple of months back about Lieberman. He's the prince of our paradoxes, a man who has held every single senior position in the state of Israel except for the prime ministership, has resigned from all of them, and has gone up in the polls. Who does that?
Yeah.
And he shifts. He finds a new cause every time. One time he's against the Arabs. The other time he's against the ultra-Orthodox. Now, in the basis of his anti-Orthodox stand, he wants to realign himself away from the right and with the left. Now, that could be a shaker-upper. That's the big difference between us and the British government. The British government actually has a government. Israel does not yet. So we look upon all these governments with envy. It could be the game changer, the game breaker. Nobody is tremendously optimistic right now. The two blocks, the right center block and the center block, are exactly neck and neck tied.
Now, when you say it could be a game breaker, I'd like you to expound on that, because I looked at this and I said to myself, I wonder if the center right says we really have got to give Netanyahu a mandate because we do not want these left-wing crazies in the government.
Well, it's interesting. It's not an American expression, but the British would say it's a cat and the pigeons. You know that one?
No.
A cat and the pigeons is the Trump peace plan.
It
gets the pigeons flying everywhere. So you have this strange situation in Israeli politics where both the radical right and the radical left reject the Trump peace plan. And the left because it doesn't give enough to the Palestinians, and the right because it gives too much to the Palestinians. Now that is a cat and the pigeons. Now, my long-term hope was that this Trump peace plan would bring the center together, would bring Benny Gantz and
yes,
and
you've said that many times. Yeah.
Yes, and I still hope it because it is. I think it's an excellent plan. It's the best plan I've ever seen. I've been involved in this peacemaking game for close to 30 years. It's the best I've ever seen. The closest that reflects reality. And Benny Gantz and Bibi understands that. There is this minor issue of Bibi's legal woes, and if somehow the Benny Gantz and his people can get over that hurdle and put it aside, we have a chance of actually implementing this thing. I hope that will be the case.
Now, the Jerusalem District Court announced a panel of 3 judges who are going to hear the Netanyahu corruption trials. I'm not clear if there's one trial with 3 charges or 3 trials with 1 charge.
I don't think anybody.
But it's going to be going on. What is the impact on Netanyahu's personal popularity? Is he Trump-like and sort of above it all, gets stronger every time they try and take him down?
Not anymore. It's begun to have some corrosive effects on his popularity. An excellent source of political information in our country are cab drivers. I take them all the time, and I've met cab drivers who said they were born Likudniks. They were weaned on liquid milk, if you will, and they can no longer vote for Bibi because of the corruption. But that doesn't mean they're going to vote left. And what you see is, while there may be a drop in the number of people voting for Likud, even after all the wonderful diplomatic coups that Netanyahu has pulled off in recent weeks, there's really not a tremendous bump for him in the polls. The blocks, that right of center and left of center blocks, remain totally deadlocked.
Now that can't go on, Michael Oren. So what the center cannot hold here? It's got to break. You don't want 4, right? You don't want to have 4 elections.
You don't want 4, but they've been telling us for years that the status quo with the West Bank couldn't hold either, and here we are. More than a half century later, it doesn't seem any sign of breaking up.
Okay, last question. Are there debates? Are there any events that happen, or is it just a war of Facebook ads and television advertisements and radio talk, people's thinking?
No, and this election is actually distinguished by election fatigue. There are almost no posters. Netanyahu was at a sustainable level. We had one day last week, I think I spoke to you, where we were fighting on 3 different fronts, in Syria, in Gaza, and on the West Bank. That's par for the course here. But it's been relatively quiet, and I stress relatively. That's not the issue. The big issue today in Israel is the blacklist published by the UN Human Rights Council, 112 Israeli companies and foreign companies doing business in Judea and Samaria with Jewish communities. It's an implicit boycott. And I ask myself, why does the United States maintain a UN headquarters in New York City, which is fundamentally anti-Semitic? Very good property there. Could be used for a nice university or a school.
Who published that? I mean, what division in the United Nations puts out this garbage?
It's the UN Human Rights Commission.
Oh, okay.
Which that council has condemned Israel more frequently than all other countries in the world combined. More than Syria, more than Russia, more than North Korea. And this list actually violates the UN definition of anti-Semitism, which is singling out Israel for condemnation. And it is a boycott. And the United States has anti-boycott laws, including the recent presidential directive. So I ask you, is it consonant with American policy that an organization which is blatantly anti-Semitic has its headquarters in the greatest city in the United States, the biggest in the United States, New York City?
It isn't, and it's not going to avoid the attention of Donald Trump, Jared Kushner, Robert O'Brien, especially Secretary Pompeo. I would not be surprised if some action is taken. They're not going to throw the UN out, but they could very well defund it. I mean, they really could, Michael Oren. Last comment to you. They really could make it hurt.
And I would hope so. And it's been my contacts with the administration over the years to do just that. I was very supportive of the administration's decision to leave that council. You remember that George Bush had withdrawn America's ambassador from the council. Barack Obama replaced America's ambassador to that council. And now Trump then withdrew again. I was very supportive of that. The United States should not, no Western enlightened country should be represented in a fundamentally anti-Semitic organization.
Agree. Dr. Michael Oren, we continue to check in with you weekly as we get close to vote number 3.0 in Israel. Hopefully something the center will hold or will move to the right. Thank you, Michael Oren.
Good day to you.
returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. A morning of big news out of Great Britain as the cabinet reshuffle claims the number 2 ranking member of the Boris Johnson government, Sajid Javid, quitting. He's already been replaced. There is only one prime minister at a time. I took Dr. Michael Oren, former deputy minister of Israel, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, into the break with me and continued chatting. Let's hear the end of that conversation. The Jerusalem District Court announced a panel of 3 judges who are going to hear the Netanyahu corruption trials. I'm not clear if there's one trial with 3 charges or 3 trials with 1 charge.
I don't think anybody.
But it's going to be going on. What is the impact on Netanyahu's personal popularity? Is he Trump-like and sort of above it all, gets stronger every time they try and take him down?
Not anymore. It's begun to have some corrosive effects on his popularity. An excellent source of political information in our country are cab drivers. I take them all the time, and I've met cab drivers who said they were born Likudniks. They were weaned on Likud milk, if you will, and they can no longer vote for Bibi because of the corruption. But that doesn't mean they're going to vote left. And what you see is, while there may be a drop in the number of people voting for Likud, even after all the wonderful diplomatic coups that Netanyahu has pulled off in recent weeks, there's really not a tremendous bump for him in the polls. The blocks, that right of center and left of center blocks, remain totally deadlocked.
Now that can't go on, Michael Oren. So what the center cannot hold here? It's got to break. You don't want 4, right? You don't want to have 4 elections.
You don't want 4, but they've been telling us for years that the status quo with the West Bank couldn't hold either, and here we are. More than a half century later, it doesn't seem any sign of breaking up.
Okay, last question. Are there debates? Are there any events that happen, or is it just a war of Facebook ads and television advertisements and radio talk shows? Or is there ever, like in America, a series of debates that focus and recalibrate people's thinking?
No, and this election is actually distinguished by election fatigue. There are almost no posters. Netanyahu was crossing the country campaigning. He's on the stump. There's a move away from new media to actually talking to human beings in the street, but a very, very low-key election, though we are expecting an unprecedentedly high turnout once again. With all that fatigue, people are not giving up at the polls.
And does the security, I lied last week, is the security situation stable enough that it will leave the election unimpacted?
For the time being. Because we're not in the war in the north, we're not in the war in the south. There's terror is at a sustainable level. We had one day last week, I think I spoke to you, where we were fighting on 3 different fronts, in Syria, in Gaza, and on the West Bank. That's par for the course here. But it's been relatively quiet, and I stress relatively. That's not the issue. The big issue today in Israel is the blacklist published by the UN Human Rights Council, 112 Israeli companies and foreign companies doing business in Judea and Samaria with Jewish communities. It's an implicit boycott. And I ask myself, why does the United States maintain a UN headquarters in New York City, which is fundamentally anti-Semitic? Some very good property there could be used for a nice university or a school.
Who published that? I mean, what division in the United Nations puts out this garbage?
It's the UN Human Rights Commission.
Oh, okay.
Which that council has condemned Israel more frequently than all other countries in the world combined, more than Syria, more than Russia, more than North Korea. And this is this list actually violates the UN definition of anti-Semitism, which is singling out Israel for condemnation. And it is a boycott. And the United States has anti-boycott laws, including the recent presidential directive. So I ask you, is it consonant with American policy that an organization which is blatantly anti-Semitic has its headquarters in the greatest city in the United States, the biggest in the United States, New York City?
It isn't, and it's not going to avoid the attention of Donald Trump, Jared Kushner, Robert O'Brien, especially Secretary Pompeo. I would not I would not be surprised if some action is taken. They're not going to throw the UN out, but they could very well defund it. I mean, they really could, Michael Oren. Last comment to you, they really could make it hurt.
And I would hope so. And it's been my contacts with the administration over the years to do just that. I was very supportive of the administration's decision to leave that council. You remember that George Bush had withdrawn America's ambassador from the council. Barack Obama replaced America's ambassador to that council. And now Trump then withdrew again. I was very supportive of that. The United States should not, no Western enlightened country should be represented in a fundamentally anti-Semitic organization.
Agree. Dr. Michael Oren, we continue to check in with you weekly as we get close to vote number 3.0 in Israel. Hopefully something the center will hold or will move to the right. Thank you, Michael Oren.
Good day to you.
I also want to bring you up to speed on coronavirus news. Reminding you, I've got a great column. I must say it is a great column. I have written another great column at thewashingtonpost.com on the narrative. That's the few thousand people in Manhattan and the Beltway and Silicon Valley and Los Angeles who think they can impose a narrative on American political discourse. It's not working. Bernie is breaking it. Buttigieg is breaking it. Joe Biden was their candidate. He's done. Elizabeth Warren was a backup. She's done. Now they're turning to Bloomberg and Klobuchar. They're not going to. It's going to be Bernie and Trump. I voted for Bernie. I hope you vote for Bernie. I hope you go read my column at thewashingtonpost.com because it's very good. Send it to everyone. And anyone that tells you shouldn't vote in a Democratic primary, if the law allows you to, it's legal and it's moral. If anyone tells you it's not moral, ask them exactly what morality are you referring to? What are you basing right and wrong on? Because it's always fun to talk to a secularist and a secular absolutist about the basis of their morality. And they'll say, well, it's just not done. It's bad form. It's bad form among the elite that want Democrats to win. It's bad form among the elite that don't want the socialists to have their day on the basketball court. Bernie Sanders has earned it. Clear as a bell. He is the front runner. He deserves to be in there. Now, Donald Trump, let me do the coronavirus first. China's Communist Party removed senior officials in virus-stricken province of Hubei. The ruling party fired the former banker who had been the head of the party in Hubei since 2016. He's going to be replaced by the Shanghai mayor. News of the reshuffle came hours after China announced a significant jump in the infection numbers in the province that is home to Wuhan. The surge in cases, well, Japan has its first fatality. It's the second worldwide outside of China. Only 2 people have died outside of China. But 44 more people have tested positive on the Diamond Princess, which is docked outside of Japan. 218 on board are infected. The political shakeup in the Communist Party ranks, according to the Post, underscores President Xi and General Secretary Xi's jitters about domestic instability. The number of cases China says have occurred in Hubei province has been raised by 15,000. The death tally went up 242. Total number of cases, 59,804. Total number of deaths, 1,368. All right, so it's pretty potent. Pretty potent stuff. What's it doing to Marcus? Singapore's got 8 new coronavirus cases. South Korean President Moon says, our economy will be fine. WHO needs better data. They're asking China for better data. Chinese scientists are finding the virus in human waste. Too early to figure out whether or not that's the main transmission. And there's just a lot of uncertainty. That means it's a great time to get into a home. The 10-year Treasury in the United States, it went up yesterday to 1.63%, which means the international economy thinks it's a China problem. Amazon keeps going up and up and up. But there are going to be significant losers. The Trump travel ban is going to impact Chinese people coming here. It's going to impact American companies sending Americans to China. It's going to impact supply lines. I keep telling you, long ago I invested in Secure Space. You can't. It's privately held. But what they do is they match freight with, they're the Airbnb for freight, for trucks. For stuff you didn't plan to have on your hands, and you got trucks that got no place to go. They're the Airbnb for that. Business is booming. Why? Because we got supply line disruption everywhere in the United States. And if you're one of those people, by the way, you can find Secure Space at SECUR_space. Or just Google Secure Space, but leave the secure. But put freight in there. People ask me about it after I talk about it. There are lots of companies that thrive on disruption. Think about long-term hotels. Imagine all these Chinese who are not going back that had planned to go back. What are they going to do? They're going to go find the Marriott Courtyard is what they're going to go do. Or they're going to go to Airbnb and say, I would like very much to extend my lease for a couple of months. Lots of people are winners, but what's a loser? China. China is a loser. And they're on the ropes already because of Donald J. Trump, who, by the way, had an Oval Office spray yesterday. What about impeachment? What did he learn about impeachment? Trump says this, cut number 11.
What lesson did you learn from impeachment?
That the Democrats are crooked. They've got a lot of crooked things going. That they're vicious. That they shouldn't have brought impeachment. And that my poll numbers are 10 points higher because of fake news like NBC, which reports the news very inaccurately, probably more inaccurately than CNN, if that's possible. MSDNC and your MS. And if you take a look at NBC, no, I think they're among the most dishonest reporters of the news. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
I am a very good reporter of the news. But Donald Trump was gone on a roll. He wanted to make sure people knew one thing about the New Hampshire vote, cut number 14.
Last night, as you know, we had a very interesting election, and from the standpoint of the Republican Party and myself, but from the standpoint of the Republican Party, it was a tremendous success. I got more votes than any incumbent president in many decades. That includes a lot of presidents, and it was really incredible, the love in New Hampshire. And by the way, we did the same thing in Iowa, and we were actually able to quickly count our votes. We knew within minutes after the poll how many votes we had, unlike the Democrats. So we had a tremendous success in Iowa, and last night we had a tremendous, very, very powerful success in New Hampshire. So it was a great honor, but setting that record in both states was terrific, and now we're off to some areas that I like very much.
Look, he's rolling up the numbers, but I think Republicans should go and vote for Bernie Sanders like I did. I want the main event, which I wrote about at the Washington Post. Go to WashingtonPost.com. It's on the front page. Also go to Honor Bound Coffee. I'm holding it up on Town Hall TV and at HughHewitt.com, the universe. Honor Bound Coffee gives 100% of the profits from the sale of this great coffee to military families. Their first charity is Semper Fi Fund, which everyone on this show knows I've been supporting for 15 years. The highest ranked military charity in the United States. And I told Honor Bound Coffee, start with them. You're going to make money for the military families. Start with Semper Fi Fund, and they are. HonorBoundCoffee.com. Never drink another cup of coffee that doesn't serve military families. HonorBound Coffee makes that possible. Don't forget ReliefFactor.com as well as you go out the door on this Thursday morning. Whether it's cold in the east or cold in the west. It's actually cold in the west. I'm here for a few more days on the West Coast. ReliefFactor.com. Warms you up inside, gives you the 4 natural supplements that support the temporary relief of minor aches and pains that come with aging and exercise and commuting. I know you people in Seattle, where I play back-to-back, they have 6 hours of Hugh Hewitt in Seattle, the luckiest city in America. All those Amazon employees that love me up there. Get ReliefFactor.com. And you don't get it from Amazon. You get it from ReliefFactor.com. Jim Talent joins me next. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. 51 minutes after the hour, I'm joined by our friend, Senator Jim Talent, retired from the United States Senate out of Missouri, now man about the Show Me State and Washington, D.C. Jim, good morning. I have 3 questions for you. Tell us about Bernie Sanders, tell us about Joe Biden, and tell us about who's going to be the Democratic nominee.
Well, I think Bernie is what he appears to be. He's kind of a 30s socialist and unapologetic about it and pretty authentic about it. He's got a very strong base of support, and he's in the race to stay, particularly after the last time. Biden's one big chance is South Carolina, but I think the momentum's strongly against him, and that doesn't bode well. I think we're going to see a 3 or 4 person race for some time, and I think it could be up in the air. You know, years ago, the tendency was if you won in New Hampshire, if you had the momentum early, you wrapped it up quickly, but that's not the case now. And I think Sanders is going to continue. Obviously, Buttigieg is, and I think Bloomberg's money keeps him in the race, and we'll see about Klobuchar.
Now, Bernie Sanders reminds me a lot of my dad when he was 80. My dad was suddenly not going to develop a taste for French wines or sushi. He was who he was when he was 80, and I'll be the same way in 17 years. My question is, do people like Bernie? Hillary Clinton was quoted as saying nobody likes him. I kind of like him, and I have a column in the Washington Post this morning where I think the main event would be Sanders-Trump. I think that would be the very clear choice the country needs to take.
Well, do you like Bernie? He's kind of hard to get close to. I wouldn't call him really personable. Not that I've had a huge number of interactions. We weren't on the same committees or anything like that. But I think people respect him for what he believes. I think you're right about that. And my old friend Bill Emerson used to say about people like Bernie that experience goes through them without stopping, right? So Bernie's never learned anything. Bill was a congressman from Southeast Missouri.
That's very well put. Yeah, experience goes through them without stopping, meaning they are who they are, and they ain't changing for nothing.
That's exactly right. And so we'll see how that goes down. I think it's a long way from decided. And unless somebody can put together a string of victories, which is going to be difficult because I think the regions of the country are going to vote differently, I think this could go on for several months.
Well, what's interesting to me, if you've got 4 candidates who are above 20% and a couple of candidates with 2 or 3 delegates, you don't have a possibility of 2 of them getting together by the first round and doing a deal, unless they can bring in a third party and make them SecDef or something like that. But I don't think anybody who has delegates has an interest in allowing the superdelegates to enter in round 2 and decide who wins.
Yeah, and let's see how Senator Klobuchar handles this, because from her standpoint, I could see her being number 2 on almost any of the, with any of the others. And so it's going to be interesting to see, whether she's careful about getting too personal. I don't think that's really her style anyway. But, she would be sort of a good balance. So this is going to be difficult. You remember, even as well as Trump did early, that race went on for a while. The one in 2012 obviously went on the Republican side, same in 2008. I think we could easily see that here.
Now, a quick question on the defense budget. It does not get to 335 ships, not even close. I had Acting Secretary of the Navy Modley on yesterday. He said, look, not our budget, the old team's budget. We're doing the best that we can. Secretary Esper said the same thing. But it really is their budget, isn't it?
Well, in the sense that he got in late enough so it was hard to affect. But yeah, look, I do think this, Hugh. I think that particularly in the Office of Secretary of Defense, now that Esper has fully taken hold, I think they are committed to getting to 355. I think they've heard the message. They know the importance of it. But, we're later than we should be on it. And there are ways of getting there, but it's going to mean low-end ships, and the Navy doesn't want to do that. So I think you're going to see the Secretary of Defense and Modley really having to assert their authority in the months to come.
Now, why don't they want a low-end ship that's got some hypersonics on it? That's not a low-end ship. That's like the most powerful ship in the world if it's got one hypersonic on it that hits the right target.
Well, part of this, to be fair to everybody, part of this goes back to money. Senior leaders are looking at this and saying, look, we have to buy back readiness, which they need to do, and we don't want to abandon our higher-end ships, and I understand the case for that. and there isn't enough money to do all that, and also do the lower end ships. Now, I think that argument is guilty of a lack of imagination and ingenuity to some degree, but I understand it. And I've said over and over, we cannot meet the recapitalization needs of all of the services at the current top line. It's not going to happen. You can't pour 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack.
If Trump wins re-election, would Secretary Esper, Acting Secretary Mobley, would you expect them to be able to fight for a larger top line? Because that's what David Deptula said last hour. 30 seconds, Jim Talent. Is there a chance to get to 4.5%, 5% GDP, which is what we need?
I think that's right, and even if I didn't, if David Deptula says it, I'll go along with it.
All right.
I think that is right.
All right. Good to talk to you as always, Jim Talent. Don't go anywhere, America. Chuck Todd, Senator Cory Gardner, Dr. David Agus joins us, all in hour 3 of the Thursday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to my 400 affiliates all across the world. You never know what the news is going to be, which is why you tune in the morning and why you watch Chuck Todd in the afternoon or on Sunday on Meet the Press. This morning, it turns out that Boris Johnson took a Gatling gun to his cabinet, including Sajid Javid. And Chuck, by the end of the day, you're going to have to read up on the ministerial crisis of 1886 when Lord Randolph Churchill threatened to resign and Salisbury took him up on it. And Churchill said I had forgotten Goshen. He was out of government forever. I think Sajid Javid made a big mistake this morning.
You wish you worked for one of the radio BBCs, don't you?
I do. I love British politics.
You love British politics. I hear you there. He is. It's all going to be consequential. Whether it all works or not is unclear, but it's all going to be consequential.
Here's why I think it matters in America. Dominic Cummings is very Trumpian. He is the right arm of Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He believes in fundamentally restructuring the government. He is deeply anti sort of the London equivalent of the Beltway, whatever they call it over there. And he makes Donald Trump look quite delicate, actually, in the moves that he makes. Do you think it's catching worldwide that revolution from within is possible?
I think what it is I do think that in the Western democracies, and I think what we're seeing is it's a little bit of it's less about that. I think it's what's contagious is this idea that you have to sort of be a bit blunt and a bit sort of over the top to get attention. I think that is. You have to make drastic moves. I mean, it's interesting to me that subtlety and nuance are gone, not just in the press, but in government actions as well. Like, there used to be quiet ways you push people out, quiet ways you did certain change, evolution, not revolution type of things. That's what's catching right now. And whether that's due to how people interact with government and consume information about it, and that it's these quick strikes, and so therefore government action themselves sort of become quick strikes. I do think there's something here where that our change here is feeding. Our change in how we consume is also feeding how elected officials act.
Yeah, you're right. Now, I've been doing this show for 20 years. I have never before mentioned the Culinary Union of Nevada. Never. 20. John Ralston's been on the show a lot, and I read John, but I've never had occasion to mention the Culinary Union. I have to mention it now because the Bernie Bros, and everybody knows I voted for Bernie, and I'm backing him. I hope we have the clear choice between Sanders and Trump. But I wouldn't attack the Culinary Union because they want to defend their health care plan, because that's what union members do. But my goodness, the Culinary Union is under assault from the Bernie Bros, and that is actually emblematic of what you just said.
Well, here's the thing, and this is on this Democratic primary. There was always going to be a moment of when. I mean, Sanders. Look, in the way, another way that he's very similar to Trump is that he has no control over his base.
Oh, well put. Yes.
The base controls him sometimes. The Sanders folks always feel like they have to cater to their base, almost worry that the base could turn on them, and you never want to have that. There was always a point, and I think a lot of us have been waiting for this, that it was going to happen, where the fact that their supporters can get out of control like this will end up hurting their candidate. I mean, it's very possible that what has already happened will, it could cost Sanders a first or second place finish here, which could cost him the nomination. I mean, he is walking a tightrope here. His showings have not been impressive so far, and there's a lot of people waiting for him to slip up. And if his own supporters do him in on the unintended consequence of attacking the union like this, it would be it would be a bit ironic considering that it's the intensity of his support that got him this far. But they don't have control of his supporters, and his supporters. It's the reason why Hillary Clinton is so embittered. It's the reason why so many members of the Democratic Party are not that open to Bernie Sanders.
Now, the reason you don't attack the Culinary Union in Nevada is not because they have knives, although people might wonder about it. It's because they're very well organized, and they turn out and they like their medical plan. And so if they're going to go...
Here's the here's the other problem, Hugh. I mean, look, this whole issue is about Medicare for all,
yep.
right? And the culinary union, hey, the reason they get their members is because of the benefits
yep.
that they help them get health care. You get that. But here's where the Sanders supporters are really being self-defeating here. The rank and file like Bernie. The rank and file like Bernie a lot. You know, the one thing they disagree with them on is on this Medicare for all, but the rank and file, for the most part, on the other stuff, the college tuition and things like that, they like them. But I'll tell you, these folks are very loyal to their union. So it's one thing to vote, to disagree, and I think the union would have been fine with saying, hey, just so you know, we disagree here, but we know some of you like them. Now, you're going to be asking these people, okay, who, you got to pick a side type of thing. And this is where I think that it's been self-defeating, and this is the difference between Bernie finishing first or second here and finishing third or fourth.
Well, we'll watch this week. Now I want to talk to you what Jake Sherman told me about Mike Bloomberg, who held a gaggle yesterday. He said he was a bit Trumpy, meaning short with the press. Didn't want to, a fuse that has been shortened by years in the public eye, and he just doesn't like gaggles, and he's not like Pete Buttigieg cool. Does that wear out? Because every single ad you hear, because he pays for it, I'm Mike Bloomberg and I paid for this. I would love to focus group his voice, which I think is horrible on the radio, and I don't think it helps him when he has to say I'm Mike Bloomberg and I paid for this. But have you noticed he's got a short fuse?
Sure, but most New York City mayors do because of the New York City press. It sort of creates a short fuse over time. I mean, Giuliani's like this. De Blasio's become like this. I think it's the New York City press corps that does sort of condition these guys this way. But, there's also every time I've dealt with a self-funder elected official or somebody running for office who's self-made, they don't like to be challenged and they don't like to be questioned. And this has been something that all these smart people like to tell me, Bloomberg's going to be nominated. And I sit there and say, we have yet to see him even interact with other human beings.
Oh, I listened. I played that earlier on the show. You're absolutely right.
I'm sitting here going, look, yes, you can purchase 15 to 20% support nationally with a TV ad campaign. And Procter & Gamble does that every day. Let's see what happens when you start using the product. Okay, when we start to see it on a debate stage. Look, it's very possible he does end up the nominee, and that does happen. But he's got a few tests that I have none of us have seen him in. The biggest one being what's going to happen. I mean, when Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg in particular, I think they're the sharpest debaters at times. They're very bright, think quick on their feet. Mike Bloomberg is bright, thinks quick on his feet, but he could run into a buzzsaw with one of those two. And by the way, they've been in 9 or 10 debates now. Mike Bloomberg hasn't had a serious debate, and I can't think of one when he was mayor of New York City that was of any note. Whether one happened or not, I got to research that. But the fact of the matter is, there's nothing memorable about it, and he's never been on a debate stage like this. So, and they're going to hit him hard. And when he gets hit hard, he can get prickly.
Chuck, I don't think...
And what does that look like?
I don't think you're on the stage. I know I wasn't on the stage for the 2016 debate that had the most memorable moment, in my view, is when Chris Christie took out Marco Rubio with a kill shot. Right. And it was elegantly executed, and the senator from Florida, who's usually pretty nimble on his feet, just kept coming back, got hit 3 times like Rocky hitting Apollo Creed. And that's what you're talking about, right? We don't know if Mike Bloomberg has a glass jaw.
That's right. You just don't know, and he's not done this before. Look, here's why my first yellow flag about whether he's going to be able to handle scrutiny is his decision not to allow his news organization to be free and clear to report on whatever they need to report on. When he made that first decision that he made, where he put his own news organization in a box on how to cover the presidential campaign, not sort of putting it in a blind whatever. That was my first yellow flag. Like, let's see if this guy handles the scrutiny and the inquiry.
Has he accepted a meet the press invitation yet?
Not as a candidate. He's been on plenty of times. I mean, I fully expect him on that front. I fully expect him. His preference is interviews like that. he will do on that front. I expect to see him. Frankly, I think you'll get him. His preference is the long form, not the short, right? And I do think he'll get short on gaggles, but you're more likely to see him in the 10 to 15-minute settings.
Interesting.
Than you will
Hope
in
you're
the
right.
3-minute settings.
He needs to get out. If he wants to win, you can't win with 30-second ads. I really don't believe you can. Chuck Todd, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. Follow him on Twitter at Chuck Todd. Follow him on Sunday and every single day on Meet the Press. I'll be right back, America. Your phone calls, 1-800-520-1234, connection to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. The President of the United States is Mike Bloomberg is a loser in caps, who has money but can't debate and has zero presence. You will see. He reminds me of a tiny version of Jeb Low Energy Bush, but Jeb has more political skill and has treated the black community much better than many. Ouch. President has done with Joe Biden. Moving on now. Absolutely moving on now. Let's do the business story of the day, brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian. They are lenders with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you money. They do not send your loan application out to somebody else. They actually, Sierra Pacific, lends you the money. AndrewandTodd.com, get you there. Soup to nuts. Go answer a couple of questions. They'll get your house refinanced. 888-1172, 888-1172. 888-1172, AndrewandTodd.com. The big story of the day, the business story, started out as coronavirus, but it's going to end up being in Great Britain. And I don't know what the markets are going to do with this, but there's been a sort of a massacre at 10 Downing Street. The OK Corral at 10 Downing Street. Boris Johnson taking out half his cabinet and saying, see ya, including number 2, Sajid Javid, who many people thought was his successor in waiting. However, Liz Truss is back. I mean, there are some people who are going to thrive in this, but chaos reigns in number 10, Rishi Sunak. 39-year-old superstar is now number 2 in the British government. I know you've never heard of him, Rishi Sunak, but he is definitely number 2. Jacob Rees-Mogg was surprised that Sajid Javid is gone. And when he was asked by Labour's Jeff Smith on the floor of the House of Commons, can we have a statement on the surprising news that the Chancellor of the Exchequer has been sacked? Mr. Rees-Mogg replied, the honourable gentleman is ahead of me on the news cycle. I love how the British talk. Here's how I talk about Trump Sanders. I have a Washington Post column this morning. Go read it. Everybody knows I'm going to support Donald Trump for re-election. Everybody knows that. Every single person who listens to this show knows that. And if you listen to this show or to Meet the Press where I appear, you know I already voted for Bernie Sanders in the Virginia primary because I get to vote legal, absentee, in any primary I want. And I want Bernie versus Trump because I believe in clarity. My friend Dennis Prager likes to say clarity before agreement. My callers understand what I mean by clarity before agreement. Let's get the squad's guy. AOC, Ilhan Omar, the whole gang, the squad. Let's get their guy, Bernie, who was described earlier in the program as a 1930s socialist, and he is. He hadn't changed in 30 years. He hadn't changed in 50 years. He's Bernie. Let's put him up there and have the debate in America. Let's have a clear choice. Let's have the showdown. Now, all of the elites that are out there, they used to be called the Gang of 500 by ABC's The Note. They've been called the Borg by me and other people. Now I just call them the narrative. It's all the chattering class. And by the way, I come in and out of it. I'm in, but not of it. I am a missionary to that world. I'm a missionary to the Beltway. I'm trying to bring sweet reason. The long carbine of reason from the West was my original radio name when I got started 30 years ago. Now it's just Hugh. And they know who it is. And they know what I believe. And I believe in clarity before agreement. And I believe in having the showdown. Go read the column at the Washington Post and absolutely hope that Bernie Sanders is the nominee. I don't believe a thing that Bernie believes in. I believe he believes in it. I know what Donald Trump is. He's a wrecking ball on the narrative. He's a wrecking ball on the Beltway. He is the enemy of the swamp, and he is doing what I want most done, which is rebuilding the military and appointing conservative originalist federal judges. My 2 top priorities, which means the country is protected and religious liberty is protected, Donald Trump is delivered. And Bernie Sanders will present the cleanest, starkest alternative. And let's have the showdown. Let's have it now. Coming up after the break, Senator Cory Gardner. Go nowhere, America. It is the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined by United States Senator Cory Gardner of the great state of Colorado. Good morning, Senator. Always a pleasure to have you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You are a member of the Committee on Foreign Relations, including the subcommittees on East Asia, the subcommittee on Near East, South Asia, Central Asia, counterterrorism. You will know what's going on with the coronavirus. I've been reading the headlines today from the South China Morning Post. I've been reading the headlines from the Telegraph. I've been reading the headline in the Washington Post. It appears as though China does not really have this under control. What's your assessment, Senator Gardner?
Well, of course, that's a challenge with a communist country that blocks information and basic transparency. We don't have a good look into China. We met with the CDC yesterday with WHO. They still haven't had what they would like in terms of personnel into China. That is a major concern. They have changed the way they're calculating who is testing positive with an additional test, and that added about 15,000 people to the rolls of those who have coronavirus. This, at least what we know right now, whereas the flu is like 1.5, 1.6 in terms of for every case of the flu, you get 1.5 or 1.6 new cases of the flu. Right now, we're looking at the coronavirus at 2 or 3 new cases for every 1 case of coronavirus. That's explosive, and that's why this is such a concern.
The R-ought number is what you just referred to, and I've seen it, 2.6. The mortality also matters. The mortality of the flu in the United States is about 0.07%. I've seen estimates, and perhaps you got a briefing yesterday or the day before, I've seen estimates that coronavirus out of Wuhan is over 1%. What do you know, Senator?
Well, that sounds about right. We know that this is above SARS in terms of lethality. It's below MERS, the Mideast Respiratory Syndrome. The experts continue to tell us we don't have a good sample set because it's brand new and there's 60,000 people we're dealing with, and we only have weeks of data, not decades of data. But the fact is, this is highly contagious. Dealing with a communist country that is blocking basic information and transparency, and we now have the highest cases outside of China in Hong Kong and Singapore, where there are still flights. There is still activity between the United States, those countries, and what it means continues to be a little bit of an unknown.
I have been urging everyone to read the book, The Great Influenza by John Barry. There are segments in there about Colorado. The University of Colorado was devastated by the influenza pandemic of 1918, as were many of the cities in the Centennial State. Do you think the United States government is doing everything it can and should be doing?
Well, I think the United States government has taken steps that have never been taken before. In fact, we had the first quarantine since basically small populations of smallpox in the 1960s. So that is an unprecedented step that has been taken. I think the grounding of flights was unprecedented, and that those measures must continue to protect the American people from harm. As additional measures need to be taken, the administration must not hesitate to put the safety of our people first. And that's why I encourage them to continue to monitor this closer than they've ever done before any other like situation.
Now, Senator Gardner, you're considered one of the center-right people who can work across the aisle. You've got a great reputation for dealing with colleagues in both parties. I am curious from that vantage point. Even in the middle of an election year with the presidential on top and you were up for re-election, I think you're going to win pretty handily, but you're up. The question is, will the Senate be able to advance bipartisan action as needed on something like coronavirus?
We have to. That's the bottom line. The American people not just expect it, they demand it, and that's what we are here to do. Politics can't risk a coronavirus outbreak and a lack of response from Congress. Now, look, while Chuck Schumer is going to try to block everything that I do, he's already blocked a bipartisan wallway resolution that I'm trying to get across the finish line. I think the members, other than Chuck Schumer, recognize the importance of good policy, not just playing politics.
We had the leader on the show this week, and he talked about leaving no vacancy behind. Are you confident that the district court vacancies in Colorado and your circuit court vacancies on the 10th Circuit will be filled by the time of the election?
I am, yes. In fact, we're working on another judge right now through the White House. I believe this nominee will have support from my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and so I am convinced that, like that vacancy across the country, we'll be able to fill these vacancies.
So the post-impeachment atmosphere in the Senate, how do you describe it?
I think you have a significant disappointment from the Democrats who drove a very partisan impeachment process that they thought would disable the president. But in fact, I think the American people have rejected the impeachment. And now we see opportunities to go forward, additional judges being confirmed, new legislation being confirmed, hopeful tax cuts that continue to be looked at.
Now, I've been arguing that Republicans who have the right to, as I did in Virginia, ought to exercise the opportunity to participate in the Democratic primary so that we can get clarity in the nominee. I want Bernie Sanders to run against Donald Trump because I think basically all the Democrats are Bernie Sanders in just different shades of rhetoric. What do you think of Senator Sanders? Are you surprised he's won 2 in a row? Some people say Pete Buttigieg won the first one and Bernie won the second one, but a lot of people say Bernie won the raw vote total, so he's got 2 in a row. Are you surprised?
You know, for the party that hates the Electoral College, it's amazing how Bernie Sanders can lead in the popular vote, but Pete Buttigieg leads in the delegate count. So they seem to be a little bit at odds with their Electoral College stance and their delegate stance. Look, I think that the most dangerous thing coming out of the 2016 election, the most dangerous thing coming out of the 2016 election was the normalization of socialism by Bernie Sanders. I said that shortly after the election in 2016 because I said, what happens if somebody actually gets elected with these positions? Shortly after that, we saw AOC out of New York, and now we see Bernie Sanders being the clear frontrunner of the Democratic Party for the nomination. Look, when Republicans were getting third place against Donald Trump, the media never said that they had a remarkable night and they were leading the Democratic nomination. They knew the first place finisher was the first place finisher, and in this case, it is Bernie Sanders. And so you are right. I completely agree with you. There are no shades of socialism. It is socialism, and whether it's Bernie Sanders or not, they all want a Green New Deal. They all want Medicare for all, or a public option that leads to Medicare for all, that is Medicare for all. It is dangerous for this country.
You will not have an opponent for a long time, and I posted Cory Gardner for Senate so people can go there and support you, but you will have a flood of blue money. I mean, just a flood of blue money. You've been identified as a target. Does Colorado hang on to its reputation of one from one party, one from the other? You got Michael Bennet across the aisle. Michael Bennet and Cory Gardner both represent that. And Bennett's center left, you're center right. Does Colorado hang on to its tradition, or does the wave of blue money put you in peril?
Well, I think the wave of blue money is certainly a very perilous challenge for us, and that's why we're going to need help across the country and across the state of Colorado. We win Colorado, we hold the majority. It's that simple. I believe the people of Colorado value independence. They value that red and blue sort of mix that we've had. Not only am I the only Republican now from Colorado statewide, but I'm also the only Republican who lives like more than 20 miles away from everybody else. Everybody else lives in Denver or Boulder. I live out on the eastern plains of Colorado. And so I think we need that diversity. We need that difference of opinion. We need somebody who's going to stand up for freedom, liberty, and opportunity, and not just socialism, socialized medicine, and big government.
Cory Gardner, good to talk to you as always, Senator. Keep the watch on coronavirus. I look forward to checking in with you. I know you got the right committee on that, and I appreciate your taking time with me this morning.
Hey, thanks you very much. Thanks.
1-800-520-1234. 1-800-520-1234. Do you want Bernie, Trump? That's my Washington Post column this morning. That's what I would like to know from you. I make the argument, clarity before agreement. I like the fact that Bernie Sanders swings from the hip. Here is cut number 17. He's on with Anderson Cooper last night. James Carville has been dogging Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders punches back. Cut number 17.
Look, James, in all due respect, is a political hack who said very terrible things when he was working for Clinton against Barack Obama. I think he said some of the same things. Look, we are taking on the establishment. This is no secret to anybody. We're taking on the wall. I guess the former head of Goldman Sachs attacked me yesterday.
Yeah, he had
We're
some
taking on Wall Street. He did, yeah, Wall Street. And the insurance companies don't like me. And you know what? The pharmaceutical industry, which is charging us 10 times more for the same drugs they sell in Canada, they don't like me either. Nor does the fossil fuel industry, because their product happens to be destroying our planet.
And big media doesn't like Bernie. The narrative doesn't like Bernie. I write about it in the Washington Post. They don't want a Sanders-Trump showdown. Do you? Chris in San Antonio, what say you listening on K-Loop down in the great state of Texas? Hello, Chris.
Hey, listen, man. I appreciate you taking my call, but I'm not gonna be calling this morning to agree with you on your Sanders.
Oh, that's fine.
I honestly, I think it's the most dangerous. ideology that I've heard come from a person like yourself that I believe should have a lot of clarity, and that's what you talk about is clarity. If Bernie Sanders is the Democratic nominee, there's one of two things happen, and neither one of them are a net positive for this country. One, he comes close to winning, okay? And that fuels the validity of the movement that he has started and forces the Democratic Party to adopt, if not all of, most of his socialist policies.
Chris, let me interrupt you because I got to get to a lot of people. I got to interrupt you. I got to interrupt you. I got to remind you of one thing. You're a young man. I appreciate it. You're not remembering 1972. The defeat of George McGovern crushed that movement. Well, Chris.
This is not 1972.
Chris,
what I'm trying to tell you, the second thing, the second thing that happens if he doesn't come close to winning, which is what I actually believe will happen, it is going to fuel the actual revolution that he is trying to bring about on
Chris, that's not what happens when you that's not what happens. I appreciate your passion. I do. I appreciate the call. I want to get other people on, but I want to tell you one thing. In 1972, when George McGovern was crushed, it did not fuel his movement. It ended his movement. That's what we need to do with Bernie Sanders. Ohio, Linda. Hi, Linda. You're on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Got to be quick.
Hi, Hugh. I've got 5 reasons why you shouldn't be telling people to pull a Democrat ballot. First, we want President Trump to have the strongest showing possible in the primaries, every primary.
Okay, number one, that's not true. He's going to be the nominee. Doesn't make a lick of difference. Doesn't matter. Keep going.
I think it's momentum. That's all.
Number 2.
Second, we need to take back the House, and there may be.
Okay, stop. If Bernie Sanders is the nominee, we'll take back the House. End of number 2. Number 3.
All right, 3. We need poll workers working in November at every precinct.
All right, Linda. That voting for Bernie in the primary has no impact on that whatsoever. Number 4. Linda, number 4. Oh, Linda went away. In Las Vegas, it's Ed. Hi, Ed.
Yes, they have same-day registration both for early voting out here in Nevada and the caucus day the 22nd. So I'm going to vote for Bernie. And, is the culinary union getting too uppity? I don't know.
Hey, I'm all for the culinary union. They got knives. Don't get in a fight with the culinary union. Hey, thank you, Ed. That's what I want Republicans to say. Jamie in Cleveland, what do you say, Jamie?
I say it's wrong. We don't want to normalize the ideas of socialism. Those should be fringe ideas.
Oh, but that's how you... hey, I agree with you 1,000%, Jamie. 1,000%. It doesn't work anywhere. It brings misery and death in its wake. It has never worked anywhere. Socialism is a disaster. But the way to drive that message home... They're all socialists. They just won't tell you the truth. Bernie at least tells you the truth. When we beat him fair, square, and in the public square, it's done for a generation.
Well... God willing, but I think it's dangerous to normalize those ideas, and the next thing you know, every election will have a social...
God willing, I'm right. That's why I do this job. I appreciate the call very, very much. ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. You're about to get in your car and go driving for a long time. You're about to go rolling along, and your back already hurts before you sat down. Did you take your Relief Factor this morning? Did you take it with your HonorBoundCoffee.com this morning? Because you ought to have both products in your kitchen. You ought to have ReliefFactor.com in your kitchen. You ought to have HonorBound Coffee in your kitchen. And you ought to take both of them before you leave the house. I do every day during the show, but I get to work before you do. So do what I do. Give Relief Factor a try every single morning. Drink your coffee, your HonorBound coffee, and come right back after the break. I'm going to conclude the show talking coronavirus with Dr. David Agus, CBS medical contributor, for the latest developments on the disease right here on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined for the first time by Dr. David Agus, a CBS medical contributor who always impresses me when I see his tape. Good morning, doctor. Thanks for being up early with me.
Good morning, Hugh. My privilege.
You've got a host with RLP, which means acid reflux has taken out my vocal cord, so I apologize for that up front. The news on coronavirus this morning was not good when it comes to numbers. What is the R-ought, and why ought we to be concerned about it? What's the mortality as best you can tell, and how worried are you for Americans?
Big increase in numbers today, 15,000 new cases in China, and another 250 or so deaths. They changed the criteria. You know, testing is really hard, whether here in the United States or in China. You have to look for the DNA code of the virus and actually sequence it. So there haven't been enough tests, and it's too difficult to do. Half the tests in the United States, it turns out now, are faulty. So they just changed it by X-ray there. If you have a pneumonia on X-ray, you have coronavirus. So big jump in the cases, which is why we're seeing the change in the numbers. But it is not certainly under control yet in China.
Now, in terms of the R-ought, what's the best science tell us in terms of how many people are being infected per carrier?
Well, the true answer is we just don't know. You know, there are cases where they call them a super spreader, where one person who coughs can affect literally dozens of people. There was a case where somebody in an apartment building was infected by somebody several floors away because of an open air vent. So, you know, the true answer is we just don't know that much. It's hard to get information and data out of China where the number of cases is dramatic. And elsewhere in the world, they're rather small.
Now, I have been telling people to read The Great Influenza by John Barry because I found the history of that pandemic, especially its American episodes, to be so... it's just like an echo of what's going on right now. And one of these things about the super spreader you just mentioned, I cannot get an answer to. Why are some people super spreaders and other people not? Is it because they have bad hygiene, or do they have some particular physiological characteristic?
First of all, the book by John Barry is tremendous. You're totally right. In 1918, 85 million people in the world died from the Spanish flu. And by the way, the Spanish flu started in Kansas, not Spain. It was World War I, and the media in many European countries in the U.S. said, well, you can't announce anything like a flu in your country because it shows weakness, and the Spanish media did. That's why it was called the Spanish flu. The way we stopped it is we said, you can't go to synagogue, you can't go to church, you can't go to schools, and everybody in this country wasn't allowed to congregate more than 3 people, and we effectively stopped it by quarantining. You know, a super spreader, we think, is somebody who coughs significantly. And these droplets in the air have a half-life. They stay there for a few hours, and they can infect everybody around. So many people, it can go deep in the lungs, and they're not going to cough out a lot. Other people can, you know, expel the virus, and that's what we're seeing. We don't think the virus is different. We think how they respond to the virus is different.
So there are two big needs. There's a need for the antiviral that works specifically against whatever mutation of coronavirus we're dealing with, including the iterations it will go through as it has its passages. And then there's a need for a vaccination. Where are we on both fronts in your estimation?
Well, the common cold, 35% of common colds are coronavirus. Has anybody ever made a vaccine to the common cold? No. So it's not going to be that easy to make a vaccine to coronavirus. So I think we are a long way out from testing, and we are a long way out from having something that works, if we will have something that works. In terms of drugs to treat coronavirus, there are several HIV drugs now that look like they are very effective against coronavirus. I say the word look like because they're individual cases. They're not a formalized clinical trial to validate they work, but they certainly look like they're working. You know, this virus doesn't have its own machinery to divide. It goes inside the cell and uses the cell's machinery, which in reality is a good thing because it makes it less likely that these will become resistant because the proteins they're using are their own, or are our own. And so the hope is these HIV drugs will work. The problem is just the supply of them. We don't have that many of them. And by the way, they're made in China, as are most of our drugs. So getting a large enough supply to help the world is not going to be that easy.
Let me conclude, Dr. Agus, and thanks for your time, by asking you to play Fear Factor with me. If Ebola was a 10 and MERS was a 9 and SARS was a 3, where is Dr. David Agus on the fear factor when it comes to the Wuhan coronavirus, or whatever the new name is the WHO came up with?
The reason this virus has caused such a calamity in the beginning, it was done in the Wuhan province where there wasn't really health care and it was a difficult place to deliver any sorts of care. If this happened in the United States, the mortality rate will be dramatically lower because we will be able, first of all, to contain it better, and second of all, we'd be able to treat it with supportive care in these antivirals. I would put the number as probably a 4 to 5. So it's nowhere near as deadly as some of the other viruses you made. It is very infectious, but I think in our country and other developed countries is going to be easy to control.
Dr. David Agus, please keep coming back. Follow him on Twitter if you're not already, at David Agus, AJUS. He's a USC doctor. It's amazing to me. We've got a USC expert. I give USC a hard time, Doc, but that's okay. Please keep coming back, and thank you for being up early to join me. CBS medical contributor and an important, I always like to bring the experts on. You know me. I interview well, but I know what I don't know, and I don't know much about this coronavirus. Neither do you. Neither do you. That's why you listen every single day to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. Thank you for listening. We'll be back tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.